Good morning and welcome to the North Carolina 4-H Daily Spark. This morning's program is going to be Cooking in the Kitchen, Episode 1. And what are we making, Greg?
We're going to be making some ice cream muffins and some omelets.
Ice cream muffins and omelets. Hopefully those of you that are going to be joining us today and actually cooking was able to download from our website the recipe cards. We've got the 2 recipes. And you have a caregiver that's going to be working with you. If you don't have a caregiver that can do these recipes with you, we ask that you wait and go back and watch the video, which we're going to store on the Facebook page of North Carolina 4-H, and you can do that activity with them later. But if you don't have a caregiver or you don't have the ingredients to do it, please make sure you go back and do it. And then we do want you to encourage you to post pictures of what y'all create today, or even later on in the week once you get the ingredients. So we want to see pictures of your ice cream muffins and the omelets that you create. And if you have any questions for those that's watching us live today, please put those in our feed. We actually have somebody monitoring the comments of the page today, so Greg and I can come back and answer any of the questions you may have. All right? So before we get started, we did think that we probably should cover a few basic safety things with you before you get started in the kitchen. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg to give you some of that information.
Yeah, so whenever we're getting ready to cook, a couple things we always want to think about. We want to think about our food safety from a microbial types of things. So we want to make sure that we are washing our hands before we get started. And if you tuned in a little bit earlier, you've already seen that hand washing tutorial. But just to kind of cover again, we want to make sure that we are lathering really well and we're singing happy birthdays to ourselves a time or two so we can remember. And then once we go through that, this process should take about 10 to 15 seconds, and then we're going to rinse off and we're finished. So for today, me and Mr. Jackie have both washed our hands and we are ready to go. Also, we're going to be using a couple different veggies today, and those veggies have all been pre-washed. And if you're ever at the store and you're not sure if you need to wash the veggie or not, you can always look on the packaging and it should tell you. If it doesn't say anything, just assume that you need to wash it. Another thing is that we're going to be doing today is we're going to be using some different types of kitchen appliances and different utensils and things today. So we're going to use a knife, and when we go through using a knife, I'll give some different safety tips on that because knives, even if they're a plastic knife, can cut you. So we need to make sure we're taking the proper precautions. Also, when we're using things like our hot plates and our oven, we always want to assume that those things are hot and handle them with care. And any time that you're doing this, making sure that you don't use these things without the permission of a caregiver. All right, so when we get ready to start, Mr. Jackie's going to go ahead and read through our recipe for us because it's always important to read your recipe before you get started.
Gotcha. And one of the first things I wanted to ask you is if you've not already pulled your ice cream out, go ahead and pull it out on your table now so it has a chance to soften up to make it easier to work with here in just a few minutes. Okay? So if you've not done it, go ahead and grab that ice cream out of the freezer. And now I'm going to start going over the recipe. If you got your recipes with you, we're going to look, the great thing that I love about this particular recipe, I've been doing this since 2000, this particular recipe. So we've done a lot of ways with a lot of different types of ice cream, but it's just 2 ingredients. It's your favorite type of premium ice cream. And Greg, what would you call a premium ice cream? What makes it premium?
I'd say a premium ice cream would be one sometimes that would have a little bit more fat content. So when you're making this particular recipe, it's good to have a little bit more fat. So if you're thinking per serving wise, you want something in that 7 or a little bit higher. And the reason is anytime you're baking, there's certain things that need that fat to help them get that right texture that we're looking for. So looking for that when you're looking for those. And most of your favorite ones are probably going to have enough fat.
Sounds good, sounds good. And 1 cup of self-rising flour. Okay, so if you've got all-purpose flour, you're going to have to make an adjustment. Greg's going to talk about that in a few minutes. So make sure you got those 2 ingredients, your self-rising flour and your premium ice cream out. All right, we're going to read through the recipe before we get started. So the first thing it tells us to do is preheat the oven to 400 degrees. All right, because we don't want to make this up and then not have the oven ready for when they're ready to go in. Then we place the ice cream in a small, deep mixing bowl. So if you can see right here, Greg's got a white mixing bowl, which we're going to be putting our ice cream in. And then we're going to stir it with a spoon, a wooden spoon or a plastic spoon until it's softened. Then we're going to add the flour, stirring just until mixed. Because we've learned if you stir it too much and too hard, you're going to have a hockey puck instead of a muffin. And nobody likes to eat hockey pucks, right, Greg?
No, not in my kitchen.
Okay, so we want to make sure you do it right. So you're going to do it, and then you're going to add your batter to your muffin pins, and we're going to teach you a little secret about that's not in here to how it won't stick to your actual liners. And then once you get your batter in there, we're going to bake for 18 to 20 minutes. All right? So that's the basic recipe. What do you think? Time to get started?
Time to get started.
All right. We're going to talk about now preheating the oven. So Greg, can you help me get the oven ready?
Sure thing.
All right. Just a couple of notes. Before we actually cut on the oven, Greg, is there anything we should do?
Yeah, so one thing that I always want to make sure you do before you open the oven, or before you preheat your oven, is to make sure that you check and make sure nothing's in there. So when you, a lot of times people will use their oven to store extra types of utensils or different types of kitchen things, and we don't want any of those catching on fire. So we always want to check ahead of time.
Always
so
checking.
we're all clear there, so I'll go ahead and start here. And we are ready to go.
All right, so our oven's preheating. Okay, so then we go back to the next step is we've got to have 1 cup of measured of our premium ice cream. Greg, do you have your ice cream?
Yep, so
measured
I've got
already?
my cup of premium ice cream measured, and you'll notice that, like Mr. Jackie said, this is already been sitting out a little bit, but you can see it's not completely melted, and you don't want it completely melted. So putting it in the microwave and nuking it is not a good idea. So we want to make sure that we have that time to actually set up and to do a little melting, a little softening on its own. So I'm going to get all of this out here, and I've got it there ready. Toss this into the sink, and then I'll start the process of stirring and softening. And this process will take a little bit of time depending on how soft your ice cream was. And so while I'm doing this, Mr. Jackie's going to show us how to get our flour ready.
Got you. So one of the things you have to have is you definitely have to have a 1 cup measure cup. And there's 2 different types of measuring cups that you may know. This right here is what we call a dry measure cup. But can you use liquids in a dry measure cup, Mr. Greg?
I don't know, can you?
Absolutely. They actually hold the same amount of stuff. Liquid, if you just notice, normally has a spout, and there's a little bit extra room on here when you do your measurements so that it's less likely you're going to spill it. If I fill this one up with water all the way to the top, it's more likely that I might spill it. That's why we basically have the difference between the 2 cups. Plus, it's easier when you're doing dry ingredients to be able to measure, and I'm going to show you that right now. So I'm going to put our water down right there, which we're going to need for our second recipe. And it calls for sifted flour as well. So if you don't have a sifter, what you can do, and I'm just using a simple little mesh screen that we're going to do for our sifter. But if you don't have a sifter, if you just take a spoon and we'll sort of add some air and just make it light, we want to make sure that the flour is not compacted, because if the flour is compacted or you try to put too much flour in there, it's going to make your muffins really hard as well. So we want to make sure we're taking good measures to have the best ingredients we can. And so if you notice, I'm going to slowly spoon it in using a spoon. And I'm going to fill it actually over the top. And notice I'm doing this over a bowl. All right. Get you a little close up here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the back of this butter knife, and I'm just going to slowly go back and forth, and I'm going to make sure I got the best measurement possible. Okay? Now to make sure it's extra sifted, I'm actually going to put it through here. If you don't have a sifter, that's okay. You can dump it directly into your bowl. I like to make sure they're extra light and fluffy, so just adding this little extra step, it makes a better quality product, and that's one of the things we want you to have. All right? So now we're ready for adding this to our ice cream, if our ice cream's ready. Mr. Greg, let's look at your ice cream, see if it's ready.
So as you can see, when I first started, my ice cream was much tougher and much more solid. Now it's starting to loosen up. It's starting to get to where I can work with it, and I'm getting really close to where I'm going to put my flour in. But as you can see, it's still not completely falling off. It should kind of run off when I put this on there. So I'm going to stir it up a little bit more. And this is one of those things that it's almost a workout halfway through it too, because you're stirring, you just don't know if it's ever going to end. And so if you have a partner, it's a good way to pass it back and forth as you're going.
Yeah, normally when we're doing this with the kids, we'll have 3 youth working as a team on this, and they'll each take turns working it out. And sometimes too, we'll do a double batch. So this would be a good time to talk about that. Let's say you've got a big family. So let's say there's 6 of your family, like in mine. we may need to fix double the batch. So how would we do that with this recipe, Greg?
Yeah, so this is one of those great recipes because it's a one part. So you can double, triple the recipe very easily by just doubling the amount of each ingredient. So for these, we've had 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of our ice cream. So we can just simply go 2, 2, 3, 3. So very easy math to make that happen, especially if you want to have some for the next day.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And one thing we know about these, they freeze very well too. So.
All right. So now you start to see. This is what we're looking for. All right. So you see how it just naturally, easily falls off. It's nice and liquefied, but it's not completely melted. All right. So I've still got a little texture in there. All right. So Mr. Jackie talked about his flour, and he was using self-rising flour. The flour mixture that I went ahead and put together is all-purpose flour, so it's likely that you might not have self-rising flour. You might not be able to pick it up at the grocery store. They may be out. So all you have to do is you just add 1.5 teaspoons of your baking powder and then a little bit of salt, so normally about a 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, or sorry, 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then mix it up very well so it's already been mixed in. You don't want it clumped up. You want to mix it in really well, and that'll give you the leavening that you're looking for. So that's the part. This gives you that leavening agent. All right. So now that I've got this ready, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to slowly add, and I'm going to have Mr. Jackie add a little bit of flour in there as I stir. If you have a partner, this works really well. And so as I stir, I'm just going to keep going, and I just don't want to see any white. And I'm not trying to stir it and be too rough with it at this point, because like we talked about earlier, if you over stir and you over mix, you're going to get much tougher muffins, and nobody wants a tough hockey puck muffin.
Nope, nope, nope.
All right, so I'm starting to get it here, and you may find that if your measurements are a little bit off, that you that the muffins will be a little drier looking, or your mixture won't get completely uniform. And if that's the case, this is why we're slowly adding the flour. You can always leave a little bit of flour out if you need to, but for these, we know we did our measurements right, so we should be good to go. All right, so I'm going to keep mixing these in. Right. Mr. Jackie, go ahead and throw the rest of that in there. All right, and I'm just going to mix these in. And like I said, I'm just trying to mix it just good enough so that I do not have, I don't see any flour, so I don't want to see any white.
Greg, I've actually got one complete. This is actually a different flavor of ice cream. And if you'll look at this right here, you can see how uniform it is, but you can see it's still a little bit wet. So these are going to be just about perfect to go in there. So these are about ready to spoon in. Right. Greg, something else I was thinking about. What if somebody only had like a regular ice cream and they didn't have a premium? What's something they could do to add something to it to make it a little bit special? Because, you know, if they're having to use what's already at home.
Yeah, so that's a good thing. So if you don't have the premium ice cream, you can add something in that'll give it a little bit of that texture, give it a little bit of that fat. So what we're going to do today is we're going to add in a couple of chocolate morsels or little milk chocolates. You can use any of your favorite ones. If maybe you like to put little Reese pieces, or you want to chop up and put some Oreos or something like that, or if it's during the season and you want to put some fruit in, this is a great time to add in a couple strawberries or add in some blueberries to really make that recipe pop. So what I'll do is I'm going to wait, and once I get this mixed up, that's when I want to actually add it in. So I'm going to take this in, and I'm going to add those in right at the end. So once I get my batter ready, then I'm going to throw a couple of these in. And this is really important if you are using like a berry or something like that, because if you have the berry and you put it in too soon and you have to mix it up, then what you're going to get is you're going to end up getting all your berries are going to break up, and you're going to mush it up, and you're not going to get this texture. Because just like when you're making pancakes, you always want to actually be able to see those berries. It's going to give you a much better presentation.
All right.
All right.
Well, if it's okay, Greg, I'm going to go ahead. My ice cream's ready here, and my mixture's ready, and I'm going to go ahead and fill these up right here.
All right.
All right. I'm going to teach you a little trick. I have to tell you, I actually got this trick from my wife. She does a lot of baking. And I don't know if you've ever picked up a cupcake or a muffin and half of it sticks to your wrapper. That's sort of, you know, then you have to try to eat it off there because you don't want to go to waste, right?
Yeah.
Well, she just showed me if you take the nonstick spray and you just give it a little dollop, just like this, that will make it release. Once you go to unwrap it, you won't have that problem. So something as simple as that, just a little spray. So if you got a nonstick spray, that's a quick way to do it.
Awesome.
If you don't, you'll be okay. What if they don't have the liners, Greg? What's something else they could do if they don't have liners?
Yeah, so if you don't have the liners, you can actually cook them straight in the pan, but just the same kind of thing. You want to make sure you check your pan and make sure that it's going to be either nonstick or that you put a little bit of nonstick spray in there. So you don't have to have the liners. The liners just make it a lot easier too if you're going to take these to a gathering or to some friends. That way they can actually hold them and have their individual one. So it just makes it a little bit easier.
All right, as I'm filling these up, I'm only going to try to go about halfway right now because I want to make sure I get the full serving. This recipe actually, if we looked at the yields earlier, and I didn't mention that, this recipe, 1 cup to 1 cup, yields 6 regular size muffins or 12 miniature muffins. And so I want to make sure that I get the full 6 muffins out. So I'm going to fill them up about halfway, and then I'm going to come back and I'll make sure that they're all even after that. Should we ever fill up these all the way to the top, Greg?
No, not this particular recipe. So depending on the recipe and how much of a rise you're going to get out of whatever you're baking, that will determine if you're going to fill it all the way to the top. So with these, like we said, we're going to use self-rising flour. So these are actually going to rise up. So if we put them all the way to the top, they could actually pour over to the edge and you might get some burning on the actual pan. So just to make sure that you're putting them about halfway up, and this recipe, if you've measured out properly, should work just right if you get your measurements even.
All right, I'm going to see if I can tilt this towards camera number 2 in here in just a second, to sort of so y'all can get a chance to see how that looks like a regular normal batter. So, and these will be ready to go in the oven in just a minute. I think I heard it ding just a second ago. It may already be preheated.
All right. Yep. So it looks like we're preheated. We're ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop these in the oven. And how long did I need to put them in for, Mr. Jackie?
18 to 20 minutes.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and any time that I'm getting ready to open my oven, I always want to step back and open it just slightly so that that heat and that steam can release, because that heat and steam can actually burn you. So I'm going to actually step back, pull that open just slightly, let that heat release before I put it in there. All right. So now that I'm putting them in there, all right, so we should be ready to go.
All right, let's see. Do we need to set the timer just to make sure we don't forget?
All right, we're good to go.
Awesome. Now, Greg, has it been 18 minutes yet?
I don't know if it's been 18 quite yet.
I was just trying, I really love to hit a muffin right now.
Yeah.
Is there any way we can do that?
Lucky for you, we're going to do a little bit of production magic here, Jackie, and we're going to have some muffins that we actually prepared ahead of time just for this particular case, so we can show you right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear my space off a little bit, and I'm going to bring these muffins out that we already prepared. All right. So these particular muffins, we know that these are ready and they're already prepared. But if we didn't know, what we've got is we've actually got some toothpicks, and I'll let Mr. Jackie grab one and I'll grab one. And when I'm getting ready to check to see if they're ready, how do I know, Jackie, if they're ready or if they're done?
Well, normally what you do is you'll stick the toothpick in the very center, and you try to get it to go all the way to the bottom where you fill it at the bottom. And then I'm going to pull it out. I'm just going to pull this up here so hopefully we can get a good angle here. And then I'm going to pull it out. If it comes out dry, then that means it's done. If it was to come out and it was really wet, that means it probably needs to go a couple more minutes. Okay. Now, one of the other things you have to think about too, though, if you do have a chocolate chip or something, you might need to see, is it a chocolate chip that's melted around it, or is it actually batter? Okay?
Makes sense, yeah. And do I have to check all of them, or is one of them fine?
Well, I like to go through and check every one of them just to make sure, because as you can see, some of the cupcakes, muffins are a little bit different size-wise. So if you got a little bit more batter in one, it may take longer for that one to cook. So it may be that you have to cook them a little bit longer. So check every one of them just like you would if you're checking steaks on a grill or a temperature. You want to check each one to make sure it's done.
That sounds great. All right, let's say we cut one of these muffins up and see how we did.
I think that'd be great.
So I'm going to grab us a butter knife, and what I'm going to do is we're going to pull some of these out, and we're going to cut them open and see how we actually cooked and how we did on our process. So when I cut these open, you can see, if you open them up, these are nice, good muffin texture. There's not a lot of huge holes in here. So when we have the, if you were to over mix it, or if you were to get too tough, a lot of times you'd see big, huge holes in these muffins. But these look pretty good. So these mean we did a pretty good job when we prepared these ahead of time.
Notice that the paper didn't stick. So so you notice it, see how easily it comes out.
Awesome.
So let's cut one of mine open and see if we did a good job.
See how you did.
All right. We'll cut this in right here. Open it up. Oh, looky there. That looks like a very good muffin for sure. So that's what we want to see. Like I say, if we had a whole bunch of big holes in it, things like that, we know that we probably overmixed it. And when we're doing this with youth in class, when we do this as part of our summer fun, sometimes they'll bite into them, and we let them try different people's muffins, and they'll see if somebody overmixed something and see what the difference is. And so if you overmix them, it's okay. One of the things we talk about 4-H all the time is learn by doing, but also we make the best bet. So every time we do a recipe, we find a way to make an improvement. And so don't worry if something doesn't work out the first time, because you'll have a chance to do it again, and every time you do it, you're going to get better.
That's the truth. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take these muffins and we're going to put them away, and we're going to start our next recipe. All right. So give us a second and let us clear our stations and get ready for our next recipe.
This would be a good time to show our logos and sponsors for all those folks making this program available.
All right, so you think we're ready?
I think we're ready. You want me to start talking about this recipe?
Yeah, why don't you read it for us and tell me what I need to have?
All right. First of all, we need to make sure y'all got the right ingredients. For this recipe, you'll need 1 egg, a tablespoon of water, which we have water right here, an 1/8 teaspoon of salt, and if you don't have an 1/8 teaspoon, I'll show you another way that you can measure that, a dash of pepper, and 1 teaspoon of unsalted butter. Okay, so that's the basic omelet recipe. Then you're going to need something to put in that omelet, right? And you may not have all the ingredients that we've got, but we're using ham, grated cheese, green peppers, tomatoes, apples. Hold on, apples. Oh, wait till you try apples in your omelet. You know, and then of course we also have some other ingredients that might be left over. If somebody had some sausage or bacon left over from breakfast and they want to use that in an omelet, this would be a great time to use some of those leftovers. Also, let's say you don't like meat at all. Maybe you want to use mushrooms instead. So thinking about some different things, even though it's not on the recipe, people can add other things. So we've got a few items that we're going to do here, but you got to use what you have at home too.
Exactly. All right, so let's say before we get started, go ahead and read what I need to do and how I'm going to actually make this omelet.
Well, when we do this in our class, one of the things we want to make sure is that our youth, we don't cross-contaminate. And Greg, can you talk about what cross-contaminate means?
Yeah, so cross-contamination is when we have something like a raw meat or a raw egg and we inadvertently transfer it onto a ready-to-eat product, so something like my vegetable or something like that. So for this particular case, it wouldn't be quite as big of an issue because everything's going to be cooked, so we're going to cook everything in our pan. But if I was going to make a salad to go along with this egg and this omelet, then I would need to make sure that I had that prepared ahead of time, set away, so that there wasn't any issues with my egg going into my salad.
Gotcha.
Raw egg.
Well, one of the first things we would need to do is, it talks about chopped green peppers, chopped tomatoes, chopped onions, and apples. We need to chop those up. You want to demonstrate some knife skills for us today?
I guess so. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through and talk about using a knife and handling a knife. And one of the first things that we always want to think about is selecting a knife. So when you're selecting a knife, it's very important that you try to get a knife that fits your size, your hand size, your age, and those types of things. So for me, this is my favorite knife. This one fits my hand perfectly. It's got a lot of weight to it, so it feels really good when I cut with it. But you might find that you like one that's a little bit smaller and suits you a little bit better. So feel free to experiment and try different knives to figure out what works best. You'll also notice safety-wise, I always try to keep the knife pointed away from me and at the back of my board, or I'll keep it off the back completely. And the reason is that way I don't have as many chances for me to potentially cut myself. So when we're thinking about knives, one thing I do want you to think about is there's a proper way to hold a knife, and there's a proper way to prepare and hold the items that you're holding with your other hand. So we're going to talk about those particular things. But my knife, this particular one is a 9-inch knife, and the thing I want you to remember is when I'm cutting, I'm trying to make everything cut in between here. So I'll only use the tip of my knife to cut things if I'm going to make a couple incisions like I'll do on the onion. I'll show you in a minute. But majority of my cuts are going to be right here. This is kind of my beef of my knife. And so if you think about it, that means that everything that I'm going to cut, I want to be this size. All right, so I'm going to make sure that I try to break things down to this size. So if I've got a huge giant squash here, or a watermelon or something like that, they're not going to be instantly this size. Lucky for us, a bell pepper almost is perfectly that size. So now that I've figured out that I've chosen this knife, I know where I'm going to cut with it. Now I need to figure out how I'm going to hold it. So first things first, I'm going to actually take my cutting board and pull it a little bit closer to me so I have a little bit more control. Also too, when I take this hand, I'm going to use my pinch grip. So I prefer to pinch and choke up on the knife. Gives me a little bit more control. But if you don't feel comfortable with that, feel free to pinch back here on the back of your knife, on the handle. So I'm going to pinch up here, and then what I do is I just let those other 3 fingers just naturally kind of roll over, and I want this part of my wrist to be nice and flat. And the reason is if you're cutting just a little bit of things, 1 or 2 things like this, you're okay if your hand is turned. But over time, so after you cut for years and years and years, it can cause a lot of stress on your arm, or if you're working in a restaurant for hours and hours. All right, so I've got my pinch grip, I've got this. When I'm using my knife, and we always teach in our classes with the kids, is we always try to, once I pick the knife up, the knife should never come off my cutting board. So I can keep my knife right here on my cutting board and place it away when I need to grab things or move things, but it should never leave this vicinity. And also too, anytime you're cutting, it's a one-person thing. So I'm not going to cut with a partner. I'm not going to have Mr. Jackie come in and hold something for me because he doesn't know where my hands and where the knife is going, only I do. All right, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut up this bell pepper. Now, a bell pepper is a little bit different and a little bit tricky, and this is one of those things that a lot of people always ask, how do I cut it properly? And I'm sure there's multiple ways to do it, but a chef once showed me this method, and it makes it a whole lot easier, and it minimizes your cleanup, and that's one of the best things because we always like to try to minimize our messes as much as possible. So what do you think's inside of here, Mr. Jackie? What's it look like?
I'm going to guess there's some seeds in there.
Some seeds. All right. So this is more of a hollow fruit or a hollow vegetable. And so what's going to be on the inside of it is going to be a hollow with a core, and that core is going to have a seed pod. So if I hit that seed pod when I cut, I can get seeds everywhere. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to avoid 2. Now this is live, so it's only going to be 1 take. So let's hope for the best, right? We're going to do our best.
I know. I've got faith in you, Greg.
All right. So I know that I'm going to use my pinch grip on this hand, but this particular hand is the one that's most likely to get cut. So when I'm using this hand, I always think bear claw. So if you're at home now and you're looking, take your fingers, and what I want you to do is just roll through it and say bear claw. All right, so bear claw. So I've got my bear claw. Now this is going to feel really weird, and it's going to take much time to figure it out because our natural instinct is to grab things, and we're going to grab it like this. But when you do that, you expose your thumb in the back, and you also expose your potential fingers on top to getting cut. At least if the other way, if I nick myself, it's just a small cut versus losing part of my finger, which I don't want to do. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my bear claw. I'm going to go down, and the first cut I'm going to make is I'm going to take the top off. So when I do this, I'm going to angle my knife, and I'm going to go straight down and through. All right, and we've already got a couple seeds, so this is just a bad bell pepper, I guess. I don't know where you got this thing. All right.
I won't say, so I don't want to might be a future sponsor down the road.
All right. So I'm going to take that off, and then I'm going to go ahead and take the other end off as well. And I'll take these and put them to the side, and I can use these pieces later if I need to for my recipe. All right, so now that I've got it, you can see that their core is here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, and I'm going to make 1 small little incision there just to break the edge. And what that does is that starts the process of popping the bell pepper open. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife. I have the same exact grip, but I'm going to actually come over to a little bit closer, and all I'm going to do is I'm lightly sawing here. And what I'm doing with that is I'm just trying to take out that membrane right there in the middle and take out that seed pod. And if you do it right, you can pretty much get the whole entire seed pod without spilling tons of seeds. All right, so I've got a couple of seeds that didn't want to cooperate, so this bad bell pepper. All right, so I'm going to take those off and go ahead and pick those out because although those seeds are potentially edible, they're probably not very tasty, so we don't want them in this recipe. Now that I've got here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down to a little bit more manageable sizes. So I'm going to take here and I'm just going to go in and make me a couple of manageable sizes. And when I get down to these sizes, now I've got down to a nice flat surface. So one of our goals is to always get to a flat surface. So now that I've got a nice flat surface, all I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, and what do you think for this recipe, Jackie? Should I do more of a strips, like in a fajita, or should I do something more of a small dice?
I would prefer smaller dice because when I'm eating an egg, I don't want a big pop, a long piece. And plus, it's going to be harder to eat, first of all.
Oh, true.
And it's probably not going to cook evenly as well because that's something else we got to think about is the size we're cutting everything else so that it all cooks at the same time.
So all the other things that Mr. Jackie already cut up for us are going to be small, so they're going to be more of a dice. And it's very important that we cut everything as close to the same size as possible. That way they're going to cook evenly. So I'm going to go ahead and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by making strips. And what that's going to do, I'm going to show you in a minute, it's going to make it easy for us to do a dice. And as you see, what I'm doing when I do this process is I'm taking the knife, I'm going down and through. And then I'm pivoting the knife back, down, and through. Also, I try to minimize any cuts where my angles change. So I just want to go down and through. That's going to give me the most integrity to my knife and the less likely for me to cut myself. All right, so once I get my strips, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my strips over. And if you're not as comfortable doing multiple at a time, you can just do a couple. So just like 3, 4, or even 1 or 2 if you're just getting started. But I'm going to come up, I'm going to line those up. I'm using my bear claw, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to come back through, and I'm just using my nice smooth rocking motion as I go to the end. All right, and now I've got a nice small dice that's going to go really well with everything else that we've got. All right, so now that we've got the bell pepper, what about an onion? Now, onion's a little bit different. Onions are not hollow like a bell pepper. And onions actually, they have layers. And so...
parfaits have layers too. Sorry, it's our joke.
So, with our onions that have layers, we're going to use those layers to our advantage because they're almost like already built-in cuts. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with cuts this way and then come back across that way, and that's going to actually be able to give me my small dice. But if I was to do, and I was looking for strips or something like that, I would follow the lines that are actually on the onion and cut along those lines, and that's going to give me nice little strips. But for this instance, this is going to be the one time where you're actually going to be able to use the tip of your knife. So I'm going to come in, and I'm just going to make nice little incisions all the way along the onion, trying to avoid my fingers as much as possible. And then, as you see, I didn't cut all the way through. And the reason is because I want that root end to stay in. That's going to help me keep it all together and make this next cut that much more effective. So I'm going to come back through now. I'm going to set my knife, and I'm just going to go down. All right, and as you see when you do this, what you get is you get little pieces and little dices. All right, so now that we've got our onion cut, we've got our bell pepper cut, I'm just going to take these and put them over here into our tray. All right. So now that I've got my stuff cut up, what's the next step, Mr. Jackie?
Well, first of all, I just want to put out one more disclaimer for our caregivers. If you're working and going to be cutting up anything, make sure that you're doing it with your caregiver, that they're watching with those knife skills. We want to make sure when we do our classes live, we always have an adult that's watching when our youth and students are actually participating, and we want to make sure that you're doing the safety at home as well. Okay? So the next thing we've got to do, well, they say to make an omelet, you got to crack a few eggs. So we better crack an egg. So let me grab the eggs real quick. All right. What's really cool about these particular eggs is these were donated to us by one of our 4-H families that raise chickens. So we're actually adding one of our kids, 4-H members' poultry projects for our cooking program today. All right? So, Greg, when I was growing up, I always saw people and they would just crack their egg on the side of the bowl and crack it open that way. Do you think that's the right way to do it?
Well, I used to think that was the right way, but then Mr. Jackie showed me a much more efficient method that doesn't get eggs all over the place.
Well, what's cool is this particular program, when we were doing it, the first time I actually did it, we were have chefs that actually teach this when I was in Forsyth County. And so they would come in and they wanted to teach little tricks to the kids to help them remember doing these recipes. So one of the things we're going to do, and I'm going to see if I can get over here to camera number 2 so you can see this. Is that good right there? Okay. I'm going to have to lower this down. What we're going to do is I'm going to take this knife, the sharp end of the knife, and I'm just going to come down with a quick pop right here, and it's going to split the egg in perfect. But notice I'm doing it right over my bowl. Oh, there we go. And then once I do that, I'm going to get everything into the bowl. And so far I don't have any egg on me. Right? And there's none on the table. Because what kind of things could somebody get if you eat raw eggs, Mr. Greg? Or what could potentially be on here?
Different types of bacteria like salmonella and different pathogens could cause us to get sick. So we don't want to take the chance of that. So that's why we're going to make sure that we're trying to minimize the egg all over our station as well as our hands and everything else. So
need to grab a fork. All right. So now we have our egg in our bowl. And if we go to the recipe, it says we need to mix the egg, water, salt, and pepper. Okay, so we're going to go on a recipe, it calls for 1 tablespoon of water. So I'm going to grab my water from here and a tablespoon measurement. And notice I just dip that in there so I can get enough water in there. And I've got it right to the top. And I'm going to pour it over my bowl so I don't make a mess. Because we don't mind if you make a mess. Because if you make a mess, you got to clean it up. But I don't like to do a lot of cleaning up. So I try to make as small of a mess as possible. Okay, so I've got my water in there, so mix water. So salt, how much salt did it call for, Mr. Gray? Do you remember?
Was it a 1/4 of a cup?
A 1/4 of a cup. What do y'all think? 1/4 of a cup? No, it was not a 1/4 of a cup, right? But sometimes that's why you have to look at the recipes closely. We actually at one time was making some muffins, and somebody saw a 1/4 teaspoon, and they put in a 1/4 of a cup. What do you think those muffins tasted like?
They were not very good, let's just say that.
Exactly. So actually it's 1/8 of a teaspoon. And you may not even have 1/8 of a teaspoon. It's very, very small. I'm going to see if I can get over here where you can actually see it. So if you don't have something like that, you could just take and hold out your hand. You know, so like I say, and if you just look, I'll see if I can get that just about right. I'm just shaking it in my hand. And if you look, it's almost exactly 1/8 of a teaspoon. So a little trick that I also learned from the chef that was teaching this program back when I was in Forsyth County. So now we do pepper, and it just says a dash. Oh, let me get it to the open side. I actually like a lot of pepper. And Mr. Gray, there's something that's not on this recipe, but I like my eggs spicy. So I'm going to add just a touch of cayenne to mine, just to make it mine. If you like something else, paprika, something else that you want to add to it, a touch of garlic, you could add powder, something like that. You could make it your own creation. Okay? So I've got all that together. Okay? So then what do I need to do? I need to mix it up. So I'm going to just mix it up with my fork here. Get a uniform, make sure everything's good mixed up. All right? So I got that ready to go. And I'm going to put this right down here. And now, because we're done with the eggs, I'll put them back into the refrigerator. Okay, now I think we're to the point where we need to figure out about cutting on our hot plates. So, first of all, if you noticed in the recipe, it called for a 7 to 10 inch pan. So these right here are 7 to 10 inch pans. So you can look at them here. But let's say one of the things I've noticed, if you've got a bigger pan, you may need to use 2 eggs because you're not going to get the result that you want because it's going to spread out so far. It's going to be hard to turn over and make it look like a true omelet. So if you've got a bigger pan, you probably need to go to a 2nd egg. Yep. All right, but these right here work perfect for this. We'll just give this a quick wash off. Make sure, I think I knocked something into my pan there for just a second. All right. There we go. And so we're going to cut these on. And what heat does it say? I think it says over medium-high heat. So that means, should I cut on max, Mr. Greg?
Definitely not.
Okay. So I'm going to, on this right here, I'm going to go on your stove, it'll probably be somewhere between around a 7 or so. With these right here, it's probably going to be a 4. So you need to look on your stove top or whatever you're cooking on and figure out about where medium-high is. Okay. So now we're going to let that heat up. And what's it called for putting into the pan, Mr. Greg?
I think it calls for a teaspoon of butter, unsalted butter.
This is unsalted butter. And if you noticed here too, if you've never done any cooking before, you may not know that instead of having to pull out and try to measure this, there's actually measurements right here on the unit. So if you go across through here, each one of these is a tablespoon. Right there, already done. So I could just come in here and open this up and come right down off of that measurement that I see right there. And I've got my measurement right there for the pan. Okay? What if you don't have butter, Mr. Greg? What are you going to do?
If you don't have butter, what we can do is you can actually use either a non-cooked or non-stick spray, or you can actually use oil. So any oils will do fine. This one's actually a light tasting olive oil, but if you have a canola oil or vegetable oil, they'll work fine as well. And you pretty much want to do about the same amount. So if they're calling for a teaspoon in the recipe, you want something around a teaspoon. And as Mr. Jackie said, when we're cooking and we're doing these things, a lot of times we don't like to have tons of dishes when we're finished. So one thing that I have learned from a chef over the time is how to learn what a teaspoon in a pan looks like and a tablespoon. So I'm just going to go ahead and give a light little teaspoon, maybe a little more than a teaspoon in there, and I'm good to go. So I'm going to let that heat up just a little bit. And we don't want it to where it starts to completely start to smoke, because that means we're starting to burn our oil or burn our butter, and we're going to get an off taste. So we'll make sure that we let it get a little bit warm, but we don't want it completely smoking. All right.
Mr. Greg, one thing I've always learned, I've been making my omelets wrong for all these years until I had a chef teach me the right way to do it. And it was a part of the program that we did in Forsyth County. I always thought you'd add the egg first, and then you added your other ingredients in. But guess what? That's not what our recipe calls for. So what we're going to do is everything but the cheese on my plate. So we've went ahead and we've taken the items we want for our omelets from our little wonderful wheel here. And I'm going to go ahead and put it into my fry pan, except for the cheese. We're going to save it last. So I'm just going to use my little spatula here. And since all these things are ready to eat, we can actually put our finished product on the same plate, which right now saving those items is really good. So I'm going to saute. I'm going to try to get this over here too, so y'all can see the nice sizzle we got on there. And what I want to do is I'm going to cook this until my peppers and apples get a little bit of color to them, and the onions.
I'm trusting you, Mr. Jackie, on these apples. I've never tried an apple, so I'm giving it a try.
Well, I am going to tell you, my favorite apple for this particular project is Honeycrisp. They have a beautiful bite, and they get a nice sweetness to it. So if you like that savory, sweet flavor, you're going to enjoy the apples. And one of the things, too, that I've learned, and I think this was from you, Mr. Greg, is talking about, you know, how many times you have to try something before you know whether you like it or not. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so whenever we're in 4-H camps, we always make sure that we are trying new things, and we're willing to continue to try new things. Because a lot of times our taste buds change as we get older, and it takes trying something nearly 20 times before you will actually determine if you really like it or not. And so I always encourage you to continue to try new things. Because I remember Mr. Jackie telling me one time that he didn't like pizza when he was growing up.
That's right.
And so as he got older and he tried pizza more and more, he started to find that he actually did like some different versions of it. And so this is a great time when you try a new recipe to try something you maybe never tried before. So for me, I'm trying the apples today, but maybe you've never tried a green pepper, or you've never tried an onion, or it's been a while since you've tried it. So give it a try today and see how it does in this recipe.
All right, I want to show you on camera too here. Look at the color of the green peppers. Can you see how they've gotten lighter in color? That's where they've been cooking. And if you can see, the onions are getting more translucent, lucent. So I'm getting close here to being able to add my egg. And the first time I saw the chef do this, I was like, there's no way all that's going to end up inside the egg. I'm like, the egg's going to be like on top of it and be more like a scramble. But I was wrong. So I'm going to, right now, I think mine's ready. I'm going to go ahead and pour my egg over top. Give it one more quick little, before I go into the pan, I'm going to pour it in there. And I'm taking this straight to our sink.
All right, and I'll go ahead and add my egg as well.
Now, first thing I'm going to do, if you notice me, I'm rotating my pan around, and I'm going to use my spatula to pull back. I'm wanting to basically get all the moisture in the egg and move it around so it's going to solidify before I get ready to add the cheese. Because one of the last things I'm going to do is add the cheese before I fold it over. And then we're going to show you one last little trick. So I'm getting to where it's starting to come together pretty good there. If you can see, most of the it's no longer really running all the way around. We want to make sure we got a fully cooked egg. All right. All right, so I'm ready for my cheese now. Now, I don't like a lot of cheese, so I'm going real light. Some people may go heavy on the cheese. That really just depends on what your preference is. I went really light. And you may have a mozzarella cheese, you may have a cheddar cheese, whatever you want to work with. But this right here is the key to finishing your omelet. Most of us want to go down and use our spatula like this to flip it. That's why we've been taught to flip hamburgers and everything. But when it comes to the omelet, we actually want to use the back side of the spatula, and then it becomes like a ramp. And if I'm going to get a good flip here, one flip just like that, and see how cheesy, was that cheesy? That was a little cheesy.
Maybe a little cheesy.
A little cheesy there. But I got a perfect flip. I'm not going to flip it anymore because if I try to flip it again, you might actually damage it. And I want to be able to slide it off into my plate and make a good presentation. Because what do we eat with first, Mr. Greg?
We eat with our eyes. So we always want to make sure any food we're preparing looks appetizing.
Alrighty. I'm looking to make sure I don't see anything, any runny egg. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how to slide it off onto the plate. So I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to barely roll it out through there. And there's one thing I think that's missing from this plate. Let me see if I can find it. Where'd those muffins go? Oh, finish it off with a muffin on the side. There we go. So that would be a finished plate for the day. Actually, if we were doing the full class and we had the full time, there's actually a juice recipe we make to go along with this. So here's your 2 complete omelets. If you look at Mr. Greg's, not bad. Good job, Greg.
Not bad.
Not bad at all. So that's our recipes for today. Do we have any questions that's come in that we need to answer? Oh, use non-dairy options for ice cream.
Yes, you could use other versions of ice cream. Just make sure that fat content is there. And expect, too, that if you're using different alternatives, you might potentially get a little bit different consistency, a little bit different products. But it's one of those things that cooking is one of the great things that you can always experiment and always try new things. With baking, your measurements need to be correct. But with something like this, if I had a little bit bigger egg or a little bit less cheese, it would still taste great. And so it's one of those things you can continue to adjust as you go.
Awesome. Any other questions we need to hit? All right, great. Well, now we need your help. We want you to post the pictures of the muffins that y'all bake and the pictures of the omelets that you create, whether you're watching live today or whether you're going to watch later when you're doing the program. Please send us those pictures and just put them in the comment feed of the North Carolina 4-H page. And we also want to say thank you for tuning in today. In addition to what we're doing here, we want to let you know that at 2 o'clock today, they'll be having the embryology update with Tracy in Cabarrus County, so make sure you tune in for that. And then each weekday at 10 o'clock through May will be the 4-H Daily Spark. So make sure you tune in for those. Greg and I will be back in April. We're going to figure out what recipes. I'm thinking easy cheesy lasagna, Greg. I don't know. What do you think?
That's one of our favorites.
And then what goes good with lasagna?
I don't know. What do you think?
What about garlic bread?
Oh, man,
Maybe.
That's about perfect.
Maybe that'll be what we do. And it's a lot easier to make than you think. So we'll have to think about what we'll do for April when we're doing our next show. So until then, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.